I never meant to take over the cafe. That was never the plan. I was supposed to help out for a few weeks during my gap year, just until my parents found someone more permanent. But weeks turned into months, and months into 6 long years. I'm Liam, 28 now, and if you asked anyone in town who ran Delilah's Cafe, they'd probably say me. Not my dad, not my mom, not my older brother Drew, who lives 20 minutes away and shows up twice a year to take photos with his kids out front like it's some kind of family legacy. No, they'd point to the guy behind the counter with flour on his shirt and a pencil tucked behind his ear, the one who remembers everyone's name and how they take their coffee. That was me. I started small, sweeping floors, wiping tables, running groceries. I didn't mind. My parents had poured everything into that place when they first moved here from Croatia. The cafe was their dream, and I respected that. But it was crumbling by the time I stepped in: burnout staff, a tired menu, and maybe 5 regulars who came more out of loyalty than love for the food. I saw potential, though. I always had an eye for small details and a gut feeling about what people actually wanted. Slowly, I started suggesting changes. At first, it was subtle: updating the chalkboard menu, adding a new sandwich special, putting on some soft indie music instead of the dated folk songs that made the place feel like a time capsule. The regulars noticed. They smiled more, stayed longer. Then I overhauled the pastries, baked them myself using recipes I'd been tinkering with. Suddenly, people were asking for the almond croissants, then the sourdough, then the whole breakfast board I came up with on a whim one Saturday morning. My mom was skeptical at first. She'd always been more comfortable in the kitchen, working behind the scenes. My dad, on the other hand, seemed grateful. "You have a good head, Liam," he told me once, when I stayed up all night balancing the books and found a supplier that cut our costs by 15%. "You're helping us survive." That meant the world to me. But even back then, there were cracks. Whenever Drew came to visit, it was like I turned invisible. He'd waltz in, throw his arms around my parents, and say, "You know, if you ever want to franchise this place, I've got connections." He was in real estate, flipped houses, drove a BMW, had 2 kids, and a wife who only spoke to me when I brought up school tuition or daycare. My parents would beam at him like he was the golden child come down from the heavens. I'd be standing there, apron on, hands smelling like coffee grounds and yeast, and they wouldn't even introduce me as the manager. Just Liam's helping out. At first, I brushed it off. Old habits die hard. I figured eventually they'd come around. After all, I wasn't just helping anymore. I was running the place. I hired new staff, built an Instagram page that actually brought in business, ran promotions, created seasonal drinks, even organized poetry nights and small concerts that had lines out the door. My name wasn't on the deed, but in every other way, that cafe was mine. I loved it. Loved the early mornings, the smell of fresh cinnamon and espresso, the clatter of mugs, the low hum of conversation. It wasn't just a job. It was home. But there were moments, little moments, that chipped away at that illusion. Like the time my mom snapped at me for ordering more glassware without asking. "What if we can't pay for it?" she'd said, even though I'd already run the numbers and shown her the profit spike from the last event. Or the time I asked if I could take a weekend off, and she said, "But who will open? Not can we manage without you? Or you've earned a break. Just who will open?" As if I were a cog in a machine they didn't quite recognize as necessary. Still, I told myself it was cultural. My parents came from a generation where praise was rare and duty was everything. I kept my head down, pushed through. I figured one day they'd see it. One day they'd say, "This is yours now, Liam. You built this. We're proud of you." I didn't even care about the money. I hadn't drawn a paycheck in years. I lived in the tiny studio above the cafe, fixed the leaky sink myself, and used tips to buy groceries. My social life was basically non-existent. But I felt needed. Important. Like I was building something that mattered. That illusion shattered one Sunday morning, and it started, oddly enough, with a plate of pancakes. We had just finished brunch rush, and I was wiping down tables when Drew walked in, dressed like he'd stepped out of a golf magazine, button-down tucked into khakis, sunglasses perched on his head, expensive cologne trailing behind him. His kids ran straight to the pastry display, smudging their fingers on the glass. My parents lit up like Christmas trees. "Drew," my mom cooed, wiping her hands on her apron and rushing to hug him. "We didn't know you were coming." "Surprise visit," he grinned. "Thought I'd bring the kids for some of that famous sourdough." I nodded at him, gave a quick wave to the kids. "We sold out an hour ago," I said, glancing at the near-empty shelves. But I can make you some pancakes if you want. Just give me 15 minutes. He laughed and said, Nah, I'm not a fan of carbs unless it's from a bottle of wine, and winked. My dad chuckled like it was the funniest thing in the world. I turned to go back to the kitchen when I heard Drew say, Actually, I wanted to talk to you guys about something. Do you have a second? The three of them moved to the back office. I stayed out front, wiped down the espresso machine, restocked lids, rearranged the mugs. 15 minutes passed, then 30, then 45. When they finally emerged, my mom was dabbing at her eyes, and my dad looked like he'd aged 10 years. Drew gave me a grin as he passed and patted me on the shoulder. Good to see you, little bro. I knew something was off. I could feel it in my gut. But it wasn't until 2 days later, when I walked into the office and found a manila folder with legal documents sitting open on the desk, that I realized just how far they'd gone. My parents had transferred the cafe's ownership, the deed, the business license, everything, into Drew's name. I stared at the signature line. My dad's handwriting was unmistakable. Under it, Drew's name was scrawled in that familiar, cocky script. I flipped through the pages in disbelief. No mention of me. No clause about transition. Just a clean handover. I confronted them that evening. My voice was shaking, not with rage, but something worse. Disbelief. Betrayal. Why would you do this without telling me? I asked, holding up the folder like it was radioactive. I've been running this place for 6 years. You said this was our family business. My mom couldn't look at me. My dad sighed and rubbed the bridge of his nose. You don't understand, Liam, he said quietly. Drew has kids. He needs something stable. He's family. I stared at him. I'm family. You're single. You don't have mouths to feed. My mom said, finally meeting my eyes. Drew has responsibilities. So do I. I snapped. I've been living here, working nonstop, keeping this place afloat while you two stepped back. I built the brunch menu. I trained every employee. I designed the new logo. You can't just hand it off like I'm some temp. We're not cutting you out, my dad said. You can stay on. Drew said he'd keep you as manager. I think something broke in me right then. Not loudly. Quietly. Like a string snapping inside a violin. I set the folder down. Walked to the kitchen. Took off my apron. Hung it on the hook. Then I left. No yelling. No slammed doors. Just silence. A week went by. I stayed with a friend on the other side of town. Slept on their couch. Didn't check my phone. Didn't go near the cafe. I felt hollow. Like I'd been sleepwalking for years, and finally woke up to find the dream was never mine. Then, one night, exactly a week later, my phone buzzed at midnight. My dad's name flashed across the screen. I hesitated, then picked up. He whispered, Liam, the regulars, they're leaving. They said it's not the same without you. I sat there, phone pressed to my ear, heart thudding in my chest. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel tired. I felt awake. And I knew exactly what I had to do. The next morning, I didn't go back. Not to the cafe. Not even near that side of town. I just stared at the phone for a while, rereading the call log like it might give me some kind of clarity. My dad's voice echoed in my head. That strange mix of guilt and confusion. They're leaving. They said it's not the same without you. He sounded scared. Not just worried about business, but shaken. My dad's not the kind of man who admits mistakes easily. He's always been proud, stoic. So for him to call me at midnight, whispering like a man who'd just woken up from a nightmare, it meant something was falling apart. But I didn't move. I couldn't. I'd given 6 years of my life to that place. 6 years of early mornings and late nights. 6 years without weekends. 6 years of helping out without so much as a salary, just vague promises and pats on the back. And for what? So they could hand it over to Drew like it was a spare set of car keys? Still, something in me wanted to know. Not to go back, not yet, but to see. So that afternoon, I parked a few blocks down and walked by Delilah's cafe like a stranger. I stood across the street, behind a lamppost, hoodie up. The sidewalk was empty. Normally, around this time, there'd be couples sitting outside sipping iced lattes. There'd be chatter, music through the speakers, the hum of something alive. Instead, it looked gray. There was no music. The chalkboard was still blank. No specials. No quote of the day. I used to scribble in colored chalk. One of the chairs out front was missing a leg. The flowers and the planters were wilted. I felt it in my chest. Like watching something you love slowly drown, and knowing you weren't the one who let go, but they told everyone else you did. A few days later, I got a text from Nina, one of the baristas I hired 2 years ago. She was 22, in college, and had never worked in food service before, but she was sharp, kind, and fast. I trained her myself. Her message just said, "I quit today. It's a mess. Can we talk?" We met up at a tiny boba spot near the park. She looked tired, hair tied up in a messy bun, her black apron still in her tote bag. She barely touched her drink. "Liam," she said, not even trying to hide the frustration in her voice. "It's like they don't even know how the place works. Drew shows up for an hour, walks around like he's the CEO, then leaves. Your mom's back in the kitchen, but she won't take suggestions. Your dad just sits at the register, but he doesn't know the new system you set up. I tried showing him how the iPad works, and he told me not to be disrespectful. I stayed quiet, sipping my tea. They ran out of almond milk yesterday. You know how many people ask for that? A ton. One of the regulars, Mary, the one with the knit hat, she came in, asked where you were. When I said you weren't around, she just frowned and left. Didn't even order. That hurt more than I expected. I'm not the only one quitting," Nina said. "Sam's out. Jade's on the fence. If Drew doesn't learn how to do a pour-over soon, the customers are gonna riot." She paused, then looked at me closely. Are you okay?" That question. No one had asked me that in a long time. Not sincerely. Not without following it up with, "Hey, can you cover my shift?" Or, "By the way, we need to reorder oat milk." I don't know, I admitted. I thought I was. But I feel like I've been watching a slow car crash. And somehow, I'm still in the driver's seat. Nina reached across the table and gave my hand a squeeze. "You built something real, Liam. They don't know how to run it without you. But that's not your problem anymore." I wanted to believe that. I really did. But the problem was, it still felt like mine. Like something I left behind in the rain. That night, I got a call from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. Later, I listened. It was my mom. "Liam, it's me. We're very busy, but maybe you can come by? Just for a few hours? Drew has meetings. Your father's been tired. We're short-staffed. The regulars keep asking for you. They think you're mad at them. Maybe just come on Saturday? For brunch? You don't even have to stay all day." I replayed the message twice. She never said sorry. Just a quiet assumption that I'd come crawling back like I always did. I didn't respond. A few days passed. Then I got another message, this time from Drew. "Hey, bro, heard you've been ghosting. Look, we're all adults here. I know you're upset, but you gotta understand. Mom and Dad just did what they thought was best. You're a free spirit, man. You're not the owner type. But I am. I've got vision. Structure. You're an artist. You make a great menu. We can still work together. I can even throw you a little percentage if you come back. Just don't be dramatic, all right?" That was the first time I ever blocked his number. Something in me shifted after that. Not just sadness. Resolve. I'd been passive for too long. I let them call it helping out when I was doing full-time management. I let them say Drew needs stability like I didn't need anything at all. I let them take my work and hand it off like a birthday gift. So I started planning. Quietly. Carefully. But before that, I wanted to see it with my own eyes. The damage. The fallout. I needed to know how far the rot had spread. The opportunity came faster than expected. That Friday, I ran into Mr. Clancy at the farmer's market. He'd been one of our most loyal regulars. Ex-professor. Always wore suspenders. Drank cappuccinos with a sprinkle of cinnamon on top. I hadn't seen him in weeks. "Liam," he said, eyes lighting up. "My boy, where have you been? I thought you'd run off to Europe or something." I smiled awkwardly. "Something like that." He peered at me. "Place isn't the same without you. Service is slow. Scones are dry. Music sounds like someone's midlife crisis." I actually laughed at that. "You know," he added. I tried giving Drew a suggestion, told him the ambience felt off. He told me, "This isn't a retirement home." I haven't been back since. That night, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not a text, not an email, a real, handwritten letter. To my parents. "You taught me that family means showing up. That hard work matters. That loyalty matters. I lived that for 6 years. But I'm realizing now that I've been treated like a tenant in a house I helped build. I'm stepping away. Completely. No more calls. No more favors. If you ever want to talk, really talk, you know where to find me. But don't ask me to fix what you broke." I mailed it the next morning. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, I got a knock at my door. Sunday morning. I was still in sweatpants. I opened it to find my dad standing there, holding a tray of muffins. Muffins I recognized. My recipe. He looked older, like someone had sucked the light out of him. I thought maybe we could talk, he said quietly. You got a minute? I didn't answer. I just stepped aside. He sat down on the couch, set the tray down, and stared at his hands. Drew's gone, he said finally. He said it was too much. Took the kids to Florida. Said we weren't listening to his ideas. Said the cafe was outdated. I blinked. He left. Dad nodded. Took your mother's SUV. Said he'd mail the keys. I felt a mix of emotions. Not joy, not even satisfaction. Just disbelief. He was only there for 5 weeks. I said. I know, Dad said. I was stupid. We both were. We thought he could handle it. Thought you'd always be there, so we didn't have to ask. There it was. The truth. I'm sorry, Liam, he whispered. I think I always assumed you'd never leave. That we didn't have to deserve you. But the cafe, it's falling apart. Without you, it's just a building with coffee machines. I didn't say anything. Then he looked up, eyes watery. Please, just come by. Not to work. Just to see. I hesitated. My heart told me not to. But something in my chest itched. So I went. The next day, and what I saw made my stomach twist. The shelves were dusty. The pastries were store-bought. The staff? One new girl who looked overwhelmed, and a part-timer I hadn't seen in years. The espresso machine had a leak. The back window was cracked. The chairs were mismatched. But worst of all, the soul was gone. It didn't feel like Delilah's anymore. It felt like a shell. And then, behind the register, I saw a framed photo Drew had hung up. It was him and the kids, standing out front, holding a sign that said, "The next generation of Delilah's Cafe." I stared at that photo for a long time. And in that moment, something clicked in my brain. A plan. A vision. Not out of revenge. Not out of spite. But to remind them, and everyone else, who really built this place. And what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. I didn't sleep the night after seeing that photo. Not because I was angry, though I was, but because I felt like I was staring at a gravestone with my name erased off of it. That photo of Drew and his kids outside my cafe, holding that ridiculous next generation sign, hit deeper than anything else had. Deeper than the betrayal. Deeper than the handover. Because it wasn't just theft. It was revisionist history. They weren't just taking the business. They were rewriting the story of who made it. I kept seeing it in my head. Drew grinning in that pressed shirt. My parents beaming beside him like they hadn't just handed over everything I'd built and told me to be reasonable. Like he had been the one baking at 4:30 a.m. Like he had come up with the cinnamon oat cold brew that brought the line down the block every Saturday. Like he had pulled Nina aside after her finals and told her she was doing an amazing job. I lay on my friend Julian's couch that night, staring at the ceiling fan, wondering how everything had gotten so twisted. 6 years of my life. 6 birthdays spent behind the counter. 6 Christmases covered in flour and espresso grounds because I told my parents, "You two deserve to take the day off." 6 years without a raise, without credit, without acknowledgement. 6 years I could have spent building my own thing. And here I was, 28 years old, jobless, no savings, and sleeping on a couch in a 1-bedroom apartment above a pizza place that smelled permanently of burnt cheese. It hit me around 3 a.m. This was my rock bottom. Not the day I walked out. Not when I saw the deed. Now, the moment I realized how much of myself I'd given away, freely, stupidly, with both hands, and how little of it I could ever get back. But here's the strange thing about hitting bottom. Once you realize you're there, something flips. There's no lower to go. No facade left to cling to. No illusion to prop yourself up with. Just the raw, honest truth. And the truth was, I wasn't angry at Drew. Not really. I was angry at myself. For giving so much. For asking for so little. For waiting for permission to be seen. That's when I decided I wasn't going to wait anymore. The first thing I did was pull out a notebook. Not a laptop. Not a phone. Just a beat-up Moleskine I'd had since college. I opened to a fresh page and wrote at the top, "Start over." And beneath it, I made a list. Not a business plan. Not yet. Just a list of what I missed. The smell of freshly baked sourdough. Conversations with regulars. Latte art that looked like actual art. Trying new drink ideas and watching someone light up after the first sip. The energy of morning rush. The silence of pre-dawn prep. Creating something people came back for. Watching someone fall in love with their favorite corner of the cafe. I stared at that list for a long time. Then I turned the page. This time I wrote, "What I don't Mississippi." being invisible, being taken for granted, being the helper, living in a space I couldn't call mine, being controlled by guilt, waiting for recognition that never came, living someone else's version of family business. That list was longer. It was the clearest I'd felt in months, maybe years. I spent the next week applying for jobs just to get some cash flow. Barista work, catering gigs, baking prep, anything. I landed a part-time job at a new vegan cafe across town called Bean and Sprout. The owner, Tasha, was a former food blogger who'd gone all in on creating a cozy, plant-based space with a greenhouse vibe. She had a startup's energy and the attention span of a golden retriever, but she let me experiment with their menu right away. I started slow, didn't tell her much about my past, just made my lattes, cleaned up, clocked out. But on my third shift, she caught me tweaking the layout of their pastry display. "Did you move the muffins?" she asked, brow raised. "They were crowding the vegan lemon scones," I said. "People reach for what's front and center. Figured you'd want to push the high-margin stuff." She blinked. "Okay, who are you?" I shrugged. "Someone who spent too many years watching pastries not sell because they're in the wrong spot." She grinned. "You want to take over display layout permanently?" I paused. "Sure." That was the first yes I'd heard in months that wasn't transactional. I started staying after hours, helping Tasha brainstorm specials. I pitched a summer solstice board that featured house-made lavender granola, coconut yogurt, fruit compote, and mini matcha muffins. It sold out the first weekend we ran it. Tasha gave me a fist bump and said, "You're a freaking wizard." For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just filling a gap. I was being seen. Word got around. Old customers from Delilah's started trickling in. First Mary with the knit hat, then Clancy with his suspenders, then the girl who always ordered an haute couture to do and used to doodle in her sketchbook for hours in the corner booth. They'd do a double take when they saw me behind the counter. "You're here now?" they'd ask, smiling. "For now," I'd say. Each one told me the same thing, in different words. Delilah's isn't the same. It's got no soul anymore. Eventually, even Nina came by. She'd taken a gig at a bakery down the road and was thriving. We sat in the back during my break and talked about old times. "You were too good for that place," she said. We all knew it. I didn't cry, but I felt something unclench in my chest. Like a knot I hadn't realized was still there had finally come loose. Around that time, Tasha approached me with an idea. "You ever think about starting your own place?" she asked, sipping her turmeric latte. I gave a half laugh. "Only every day." "Serious question. I've got investors sniffing around. They want to open a second location. I'm not ready. But you? You're kind of built for it." I looked at her, stunned. "Are you offering?" "I'm saying," she said, leaning in, "if you want to do something yours, I'll back you. Or at least help you find someone who will." I went home that night and didn't sleep again. Not from dread this time. From possibility. Within 2 months, I drafted a full concept. It wasn't Delilah's 2.0. It was mine. A brunch-forward cafe with a bakery twist. Open concept kitchen. Communal tables and quiet nooks. Local art. Rotating seasonal menu. A place that felt alive, like it breathed with the city. I called it Bruno's. After my grandfather. The man who taught me how to knead dough when I was 9, who used to say, "Flour remembers the hands that shaped it." Every detail was deliberate. Every choice was mine. We found a small space near the Riverwalk. Sunlight poured through the front windows in the morning. The walls were exposed brick. The rent was manageable. I poured my savings into it, and Tasha helped me find an angel investor who believed in the vision. Opening day was chaos. The espresso machine jammed. A box of produce went missing. Our POS system glitched. But people showed up. Old regulars. New faces. Friends of friends. Strangers who'd seen the flyers or followed the teaser posts on Instagram. I stood behind the counter, apron on, hands slightly trembling. Then someone walked up and said, "Liam, right? I used to go to Delilah's every Saturday just for your sourdough. Please tell me it's on the menu here." I smiled. It's better now. A month in, we were breaking even. 2 months in, we had a write-up in a local food blog. 3 months in, we were booking out weekend brunch slots a week ahead. Customers brought their friends. Influencers started tagging us. I hired Nina full-time. Gave her a leadership role. She cried when I handed her the offer letter. Every day, I walked in and felt like I was breathing new air. The walls felt different. The light felt different. Because this wasn't a borrowed dream. It was mine. Then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, the bell above the door chimed. I looked up, and there they were. My mom, my dad, standing in the doorway like strangers at a gallery, unsure if they were allowed to enter. They looked older, smaller. My mom clutched her purse. My dad had his hands in his coat pockets. They looked around, at the art on the walls, the fresh bread on the shelves, the regulars reading books or chatting softly over their drinks. And then their eyes found me. My mom smiled first, tentative, watery. My dad looked down, then back up again. I walked around the counter, slow, steady. We stood facing each other, in the middle of the cafe I'd built. My mom opened her mouth to speak. But before she could say a word, the crowd parted, and he walked in. Drew, tanned, sunglasses pushed up on his head, grinning like he had tickets to a show. He looked around, nodded, and said, "Huh, not bad. Got yourself a little cult following, huh?" The cafe went still. My parents froze. And for the first time in my life, I smiled without fear, because I knew exactly who I was, and I knew exactly what I was about to do next. I didn't flinch when I saw Drew. Not like before. He walked in like he owned the place, chin high, that overconfident swagger he used even when walking into rooms he had no business being in. The same smugness that used to steamroll over me when we were kids. Back then, he'd borrow my bike without asking, break it, and somehow I'd be the one apologizing. Nothing ever stuck to him. And clearly, nothing had changed. I could feel my hands curling into fists, but I kept them loose at my sides. Not here. Not now. This was my space, and I wasn't going to let him dirty it. He glanced around, gave a low whistle. "Damn, you really did this, huh?" He said it like he was surprised, like it was an accident I'd built something better than he ever could. I didn't answer. My mom looked between us, clearly panicked. "We didn't know he'd come," she whispered. "He must have followed us." I believed her. Kind of. But the damage had already been done. Drew's presence had shifted the energy. Customers were glancing over now. Quiet murmurs rippled through the cafe. Drew stepped closer. "You got a table? I'm starving. Thought maybe we could catch up, little bro." He grinned, like the past year hadn't happened. Like he hadn't hijacked everything I'd built and called it his own. Like I hadn't vanished from my own life for half a year because of him. I let the silence stretch. Then I said, loud enough for the nearest tables to hear, "This cafe doesn't serve parasites." A few gasps. One soft laugh from someone near the window. My mom's face paled. My dad looked down again. Drew's grin faltered. "Okay," he said, that cocky edge starting to crack. "You've had your fun. Now maybe let's talk like adults." "You mean the way you talked like an adult when you forged your way onto a deed and told the staff I was just a helper?" I asked, still calm. Still ice. My voice wasn't shaking anymore. Drew looked uncomfortable now. "You walked out. No one kicked you out." I took a slow step forward. "You took everything I built," I said, voice quiet, but with weight behind every word. "The menu I created, the staff I trained, the atmosphere I cultivated, and you ran it into the ground in 6 weeks." His nostrils flared. "I tried to save it. You were just playing pretend. That place wasn't sustainable." "Funny," I said, folding my arms, "because it's been more than sustainable here. Without you. Without them. Without anyone but the people who actually care." I turned to my parents then. My mom looked like she was on the verge of tears. My dad, stoic, unreadable. But he didn't speak. They never spoke when it counted. "You shouldn't have brought him," I said to them. "If this was your idea of a peace offering, it's as tone-deaf as everything else has been." I turned to go, but my dad suddenly spoke. "You're right," he said. I stopped. The whole cafe seemed to pause with me. He looked at Drew, then at the customers, then back at me. "You're right," he repeated. "We made a mistake, and we've been living with it ever since." Drew blinked. "What, Dad? You threw it away," my dad said sharply, not even looking at him. "You didn't want the cafe. You wanted control." My mom put her hand over her mouth. I stood still, trying to process what I'd just heard. The apology I thought I'd never get, but now? Now it didn't feel like a victory, because it wasn't about words anymore. It was about consequences. And that's when the ideas started to form. After they left, I sat with Tasha in the back office. She had that look in her eyes again, the one she got when she was about to do something reckless and brilliant. "So what's the play?" she asked. I looked at her. "I'm going to take back everything they gave him." She raised an eyebrow. "You want to reopen Delilah's?" "No," I said. "I want to bury it." She nodded slowly. Tell me everything. So I did. Over the next few hours, we hatched the plan. The rise of Bruno's had already proven I could build something better, but now I wanted to expose how hollow their version of Delilah's had become. Not just to our regulars, but to the whole community. Because here's what I realized. Drew didn't just rob me of ownership. He tried to rob me of identity, of authorship, of narrative. He wanted to be the face of something I built with blood, sweat, and soul. He wanted to wear my story like a coat. So I was going to take it back, publicly, smartly, and with the kind of precision he'd never see coming. Step 1. Reclaim the regulars. It started with invitations. Handwritten. Personalized. Every former Delilah's regular I could remember got one. I still had the old customer log in a notebook, names, drinks, favorite seats. The invitation was simple. You knew me at Delilah's. Now come see what I've built. One weekend only. VIP preview of Bruno's autumn brunch menu. For our original supporters only. I sealed each one with a wax stamp. Made it feel exclusive. Intentional. That weekend, they came in droves. Clancy, Mary, the sketchbook girl. Dozens of them. Some I hadn't seen in a year. They gasped at the design. Took pictures. Hugged me. Told stories. One whispered, I knew you had something special, Liam. I'm so glad you finally got your own place. I didn't just reclaim them. I reminded them of who I was. Who I'd always been. Step 2. Expose the collapse. I reached out to Nina and the other former staff who had fled Delilah's after Drew took over. We met at a tiny wine bar one evening. I bought the first round. Tell me everything, I said. And oh boy, did they tell me. Drew had tried to cut costs by using frozen pastries. He canceled the poetry nights and community events. He replaced the chalkboard with a generic wall sign. He tried firing an employee for talking back when they asked for a second mop. He told customers that too much art makes the place look cluttered. I took notes, dates, incidents. Then I called a friend from the local food blog, the same one who had written a glowing piece on Bruno's 2 months earlier. I've got a follow-up, I told her. But it's more than a review. It's a story about what happens when passion is replaced with profit. She was intrigued. We scheduled a full interview. She even asked to visit both cafes to compare. Let's just say, Bruno's made an impression. Step 3. The event. Tasha helped me organize it. A weekend market pop-up in the park across from the river, right near Delilah's. Officially, it was branded as Bruno's Fall Fest, but everyone knew what it was. Live music, local vendors, pumpkin lattes, and my sourdough, center stage. We set up banners that read, built with heart, baked with soul, Bruno's. Customers lined up. Pictures were posted. Stories were shared. Someone even graffitied a bench near Delilah's with the phrase, it's not the same without Liam. I didn't do it, but I didn't erase it either. Then came the final stage, the one that would sting. We announced Bruno's second location. Not across town, not even down the road. Directly next door to Delilah's. The space had just opened up. A former boutique store. Same foot traffic. Bigger windows. I made the deposit the next day. Tasha looked at me as I signed the lease and asked, you sure you want to go this far? I looked her in the eye. I'm not doing this to destroy them, I said. I'm doing this to make sure they never rewrite my story again. And maybe, make them watch what happens when the kid they overlooked becomes the man they can't ignore. The opening day of Bruno's second location was quiet on purpose. No grand ribbon cutting. No press releases. No live streams. Just a soft launch with handwritten signs in the window that said, Bruno's, now even closer to home. It was less than 20 feet from Delilah's. Literally a few steps across a narrow alley. I chose the unit not to compete with them, but to overshadow them. I didn't want to steal their customers. I wanted them to walk out of Delilah's, glance left, and feel the pull of something better. Something real. The new space was beautiful. Sleek but warm. Natural wood tables, soft jazz in the background, plants draped over exposed beams, glass jars of house-made granola on the shelves. A pastry counter with rotating daily specials. Staff in tan aprons, hand-picked and trained the way I always wanted to, slow, intentional, empowered. We called it Bruno's West, and it was everything Delilah's used to be, before they ruined it. On day 1, we pulled in nearly double what Delilah's made that weekend. Customers who used to glance at Delilah's and sigh now lined up outside Bruno's West. The same familiar faces. New ones too. People taking selfies with our art wall. Influencers filming our lavender oat cortados and cardamom buns. A food critic even showed up unannounced and raved about our maple sage scones. The next morning, someone left a 5-star Google review. Finally, a brunch spot with heart. I remember Liam from the old place. Glad to see he's found his own space, because it turns out he was the old place. I didn't ask for that review. I didn't need to. The truth was spreading. 2 weeks in, I noticed something curious. Delilah's hours started changing. First, they reduced their brunch days from 5 to 3. Then they stopped opening on Mondays entirely. I passed by occasionally, never went in. But I saw the signs. The windows got dustier. The chalkboard, which someone had apparently returned to, now had messy handwriting and last week's date still on it. The planters out front were empty. The baristas looked tired, bored. The smell of fresh baking? Gone. It was dying. Not because I stole anything, but because there had never been a soul in Delilah's without me. They just didn't know it until it was too late. Then came the article. Remember that local food blogger I'd spoken to months ago? She published a long-form feature titled, "The Cafe That Forgot Its Heart and the One That Found It." It was brilliant. She never named names, but she didn't have to. She detailed the story of a family-run cafe that lost its spirit after a quiet, unacknowledged shift in ownership, and how its former baker left, started something new, and built a space rooted in authenticity, community, and love. She called it a parable of modern entrepreneurship and silent betrayal. It went semi-viral. Locals shared it. Foodies reposted it. Even a regional magazine reached out about profiling Bruno's. The final paragraph hit like a hammer. Sometimes the ones who build quietly are the ones you underestimate the longest. Until suddenly, they're the only ones left standing. A few days after the article dropped, I got a voicemail. It was from Drew. He didn't even say hi. Just, "Congrats, man. You won. Hope it was worth it." No apology. No ownership. Just a sulky tone from a man who thought he was invincible and found out. Too late. That legacy isn't inherited. It's earned. I didn't call him back. That same week, Tasha texted me a photo someone had sent her. It was a screenshot of Delilah's Yelp page. The top review? "Used to love this place. Not anymore. Ever since the change in management, it's been a shadow of what it was. Go to Bruno's instead. It's where the magic went." I stared at the photo for a long time. Then I opened the Bruno's Instagram account and posted our newest special, Croatian walnut rolls. My grandfather's recipe. The caption? "Some roots run too deep to be torn up." One morning, about a month later, I opened the cafe early. Just me and the soft buzz of the espresso machine. I was restocking the cups when I heard the bell over the door. I turned, expecting a delivery. It was my father. He stood there in his brown coat, hat in hand. His shoulders looked smaller than I remembered. I didn't say anything. He walked up slowly, looked around. "This place," he said, after a long pause. "It feels like home." I kept my hands busy, wiping the counter. "That's the point." He nodded. Then, quieter. "Delilah's is closing." I stopped. He didn't look at me when he said it. Just stared at the wood grain in the counter. "It can't keep up. We lost most of the regulars." Drew bailed again. "Your mother's tired. We can't run it alone." I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. Instead, I asked, "Why are you telling me?" He exhaled. "Because I wanted you to hear it from me. Not the neighborhood. And because—" He faltered. "Then, you were right. We didn't deserve you. We didn't see you. We let ourselves believe you'd never leave. That we could take without giving back. And we were wrong." I waited. Not for more words, just for the silence to settle. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed something on the counter. A small, sealed envelope. I didn't open it. "Not yet. I hope someday you'll forgive us," he said. And with that, he left. I waited until after the morning rush to open the envelope. Inside was a letter. No legal documents. No offers. Just a page in my dad's careful handwriting. "Liam, I used to think owning something meant holding it tightly, keeping it in the family, protecting it at all costs. But now I know the truth. Ownership is not about paper. It's about presence. And you were the only one who was ever present. I'm proud of you. And I hope one day we can sit at a table together again, not as owner and son, not as employee and boss, but just as father and son. Love, Dad." I folded the letter slowly and placed it in my apron pocket. A month after Delilah's closed, the space was empty, boarded up, faded sign, no flowers, no chalkboard, just silence. Someone tagged the front door with graffiti one night. A quote I didn't recognize. You can't fake roots. They grow where the care lives. Someone sent me a photo. I didn't erase it. At Bruno's, we launched a community mentorship program for young chefs. We partnered with local schools, taught classes, gave kids a chance to shadow our bakers. Nina spearheaded the whole thing. We called it, "The Table is Yours." Sometimes people ask me what happened to the old cafe, and I tell them this. It wasn't the building. It wasn't the name. It wasn't even the menu. It was me. And when I left, the soul went with me. And when they ask if I miss it, I just smile. Because I don't need to hold a grudge. I built something better. I became something stronger. And they'll never forget it. Final line. I pass by the old Delilahs sometimes, just to remind myself how quiet it gets when the wrong people try to claim your voice. Because now they know what I always knew. You can't inherit a legacy you didn't build.